Viewpoints. I'm Heather Isvaron, and with me today is Angie English, Executive Director for Texas Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities. Welcome, Angie.
Well, thank you, Heather. Appreciate being here.
You've been in that position for a while now. Can you tell me how you got started and exactly what you do?
Sure. I began as the Executive Director in August of 2008, and prior to that, I was the Accessibility and Disability Rights Coordinator for the committee. Prior to coming to state government, I worked in private psychiatric hospitals with children and adolescents doing play therapy and group therapy, and actually have 10 years experience as a mental health quality management surveyor for our 40-something community mental health centers and our 12 state hospitals. Texas is a very large state, so we have a lot of facilities in Texas regarding mental health.
What are the most important things that Homeland Security officials, emergency managers should know when dealing with people with disabilities?
Well, let me talk about three things. One is that having a disability is actually part of the human experience. If we live long enough, either by disease, age, or accident, most of us within our lifetime are going to have or experience a disability or have a family member that experiences a disability. And so it's part of the human experience. The census tells us in 2010 that there are 56.7 million people in the United States who have a disability, which is about 19% of our population, so almost 1 out of 5.
Wow. So when they're thinking about this increase in an aging population and some of the issues that go along with that, let's just call a disaster man-made or terror, and anything that you would recommend that normally gets overlooked, perhaps, or things they should keep in mind when dealing with that population?
Yeah. Well, we talk a lot about resiliency and Homeland Security, and I will say to you that people with disabilities are some of the most resilient people that you'll ever meet. People who are able-bodied, we get up, we go to work, we make our coffee, we take care of our kids, we do a variety of things. But for people with disabilities, some of those challenges that we take for granted are one of the things that they experience opportunities for resiliency. And resiliency is the ability to adapt to, respond, withstand, recover from, respond to so many different challenges. And people with disabilities do that every day, just trying to do normal daily activities. And the other thing is that I think people with disabilities should be seen as assets in your community instead of vulnerabilities. For a long time, I think Homeland Security and emergency managers have treated people with disabilities as, in a parental way, as a vulnerability. And I would say that people with disabilities are actually community assets, people that you could rely on to teach you a lot about resiliency and definitely want to be included in your emergency management planning.
So can you give me an example that comes to just right up front of your mind where that's really happened?
Well, let me talk a little bit about what we've done in Texas, which we're really proud of. Since 1953, Texas has had more presidentially declared disasters than any other state. So we've had a long history of disasters. After Hurricane Katrina and Rita, those two hurricanes really brought to the forefront many issues that emergency managers now are trying to plan for. And for example, in Katrina, 73% of the people who died in that hurricane were folks that were over 60 years old, and many of those people were people with medical or access and functional needs, disabilities, even though that percentage of the population only was 15% of the population of New Orleans. And so after that time, the state of Texas got together and brought in a multidisciplinary group of stakeholders. First and foremost, people with disabilities, state agencies, disability organizations across the state, And we went through a year-long process to develop a functional needs support services toolkit, which actually covers the gamut on just about anything that you would want to know about preparation, planning, recovery, mitigation, and then repatriation of people with disabilities back to their community. That effort was so successful that the Division of Emergency Management and the Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities decided that we would collaborate and form a disability stakeholder partnership. That disability stakeholder group, again, included a cross-functional group of folks, and we worked a year on developing a functional needs support services toolkit, which you can find on the Division of Emergency Management's website. It's been adopted by other states, and it's open source, so it's free for anybody to use. Because the disability stakeholder work group was so successful, we started forming subgroups. So we have subgroups, subcommittees related to effective communication, outreach and preparedness, training, planning, integration of functional support services into emergency management planning, and looking at grants. And so all of those, and the initial stakeholder group and the subcommittees are advisory to our Division of Emergency Management, and it's worked out beautifully. Coupled with that is that we have taken a network of network approach. We talk about decentralized networks a lot in terrorism, but that whole concept of a network of networks works really well in community engagement. So we have brought in into this network ADA coordinators, and ADA coordinators are those coordinators that under the Americans with Disabilities Act, if you're a state or local government or county government, if you have more than 50 or more employees, you're required to have an ADA coordinator. So we link with our ADA coordinators, and Texas has 254 counties, so even just county coordinators is a lot, but when you add city, public universities, state agencies, that's a lot of folks. Then we have brought in the Centers for Independent Living, which are federally funded, and they're located in a regional basis across Texas. We've brought in those groups. They are actually staffed by people with disabilities, and they know their communities really, really well. Then the Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities has 44 local mayors' committees on people with disabilities that function just like the Governor's Committee, but at the local level. Again, you know, local folks know their neighbors the best. And then disability organizations, state agencies, and then caregivers and their families. That network of networks, we have established a communication tool through GovDelivery that comes out of our office, and we push out all kinds of diverse information about anything related to Homeland Security, emergency preparation, and then we encourage those networks to push out to their local community. So we feel like that is a powerful approach on providing people with information, mainly in preparation for disasters, but also when we do experience a disaster, getting important information out to the community.
And is there an example of that where that tree or the network of networks has worked a disaster?
Absolutely. The latest disaster that we've experienced was probably the Bastrop wildfires that occurred a couple of years ago. Through that network of networks, we were able to get information about where the wildfires were, where the recovery centers were, which kinds of evacuation routes to take, and there were lots of animals displaced where the centers were collecting, the veterinary clinics were collecting animals. So it proved really well. And then, of course, neighbors were helping neighbors. And that's part of our Texas culture, is that we do have an independent streak about us. And so we really try to take care of our neighbors.
That's wonderful. So if folks had questions or wanted to see a model of what you all are doing so well in Texas, where would they go to find that?
Sure. The Texas Functional Needs Support Services Toolkit is located on the Texas Division of Emergency Management's website. And it's free. You can download it for your state. Change Texas to your state, and we encourage anyone to use that. The nice thing is that it really has a lot of great tools that, especially when you get to an evacuation shelter, that helps triage people who may have severe medical needs, that maybe go to a medical shelter, and then folks who need just to go to a regular shelter. So there's some great tools in there. And there are some tools in there that talk about repatriation, because we don't want to send people back to a community that doesn't have its basic resources up and functioning. And so we think that that's an important piece of the whole process.
Well, your work is very important, and we really appreciate your time today in helping us understand it better.
Thank you. Appreciate it.